Afternoon and welcome to our annual commemoration of the birthday of the 30th President of the United States. Calvin Coolidge was born on July 4th, 1872 in this village. We gather each year on his birthday, which happens to be the same as America's birthday, to pay tribute to his legacy. As is customary, the current President of the United States sends a wreath to be placed at the tomb of each of his predecessors on his birthday. And we're doing that today with the assistance of the Vermont National Guard, and we're delighted to have so many of you join us for this important ceremony. It's unique this year in one respect because it was a century ago that Calvin Coolidge Jr. died tragically as a teenager, and we're going to reflect on his memory as well. First of all, I'd invite the Vermont National Guard to present the colors. We're honored to have President Coolidge's great-granddaughter, Jennifer Coolidge Harville, to lead us in the singing of our national anthem.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there of the brave.
Thank you, Jenny. Brigadier General Henry Harder, Deputy Adjutant General of the state of Vermont, to lay the wreath at the President's tomb. General Harder. As noted, this is the centennial, 3 days shy, of July 7th, 1924, when Calvin Coolidge Jr. tragically lost his life. I'd like to invite the chairman of the Coolidge Foundation, Amity Schlaze, and the Coolidge family to come forward and remember Calvin Jr.
Stand like this. I'm going to read two poems. One is by Calvin Jr. He wrote it when he was 14, about the challenge to the family coming to Washington. And if you listen, you can hear it's octosyllabic. And then I will read a poem by Grace that she wrote on the 5th anniversary of Calvin Jr.'s death. So here's Calvin Jr.'s poem. It's called Success, and it's ironic. Success, oh magic word success, how much you mean to happiness. Men seek you o'er every land, but scanty few have you in hand. Men slave for you and with life pay if they can clutch you for one day. You are the subject of their prayers. To you they give their thoughts and cares. Men say untruths for you alone, and by foul means you're called their own. Yet rest not till their dying day, because they grasped you in such a way. Gives you a sense of the depth of this child that the Coolidges and the country lost. And now Grace's poem, which is called Open Door, and which with the Coolidge family are well familiar. You, my son, have shown me God. Your kiss upon my cheek has made me feel the gentle touch of him who leads us on. The memory of your smile when young reveals his face, as mellowing years come on apace. And when you went before, you left the gates of heaven ajar. that I might glimpse, approaching from afar, the glories of his grace. Hold, Son, my hand, guide me along the path, that coming I may stumble not, nor roam, nor fail to show the way which leads us home.
Order. Arm. Order. Arm.
It's now a privilege to introduce to you all General Henry Harder. General Harder has a long and distinguished career of service to the people of Vermont and the country. He's been with the National Guard for many years, serving as the commander of our Air National Guard, now as Deputy Adjutant General. Please welcome Brigadier General Henry Harder.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow citizens, thank you for joining us today as we recognize President Coolidge's birthday and our nation's birthday for 248 years of our nation's freedom. We gather with family, friends, and our communities to observe Independence Day every 4th of July to celebrate our liberty. Because we love our country, we're proud to live here, and we are grateful for the opportunity to enjoy the freedom bestowed upon us by patriots, warriors, and our forefathers. What does the 4th of July mean to you? Perhaps a long weekend, picnics, patriotic concerts, fireworks. There are many ways we can acknowledge our gratitude to this nation. But as we do so, it's important that we also remember the origins and the significance of this special day, this most patriotic of holidays. The 4th of July celebrates the birth of our nation, our nation's willful defiance against tyranny and the Declaration of Independence of the 13 colonies as separate but united states. And with President Coolidge reading before today to prepare and learn a little bit more about President Coolidge, the themes that came through that he held dear were persistence and hard work. And I thought a lot about that, but those themes, as you read about the president, came through in many of his speeches and how he conducted his professional life. And he believed that people can be born with great intellect and great capabilities, but if you don't have persistence and exhibit hard work, those are the two attributes that are really going to help all of us get to where we want in life. So I want to think about those today, and as we leave here today, as two of the main attributes that Calvin Coolidge held so dear. I want to thank you for inviting me to be with you all today. It's an honor and a privilege to be up here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your July 4th. Thank you.
Please welcome the Director of the Division for Historic Preservation, Laura Trieschmann.
Welcome to the President Calvin Coolidge State Historic Site. I want to start out by thanking the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation, the Vermont National Guard, the family of Calvin and Grace Coolidge, and all of you for being here today. It is my privilege to serve as Vermont State Historic Preservation Officer, and the position that honors me with the stewardship of this National Historic Landmark. On July 4th, 152 years ago today, on a warm, sunny, muggy day, probably much like this, Victoria Coolidge gave birth to her eldest child. The boy was named after his father, John Calvin Coolidge Sr. 2 years earlier, the United States Census recorded the population of Plymouth had reached 1,285, a population peak it has yet to see again. At that time, Plymouth Notch was a village with only a handful of buildings and homes, including those of both sets of the baby Calvin's grandparents, a run-room schoolhouse, a church, cheese factory, Calvin Coolidge Sr.'s store, and many barns and agricultural buildings. It looked much like it does today. John Calvin Coolidge Jr. was born on the 96th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. His ancestors settled here after fighting in the Revolutionary War, a few years before the first official independence celebration was held in 1796. Presidents Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and James Monroe all died on July 4th. And in 1884, the Statue of Liberty was presented to the United States on July 4th. This is a very special day for Americans, but Calvin Coolidge tended to hide from the celebration shown to him on this day. Like his family and all 48 governors who sent him birthday greetings his first year in office, we are here to celebrate the man who became our 30th president in the place where he was born, the place where he was sworn into office, the place where he wished to be buried amongst 7 generations of his family. Another anniversary is just a few days away, one marking a year since the devastating July 2023 flooding, from which we are slowly recovering. When President Calvin Coolidge was in office, Vermont was also overwhelmed by destructive flooding. He gave a remarkable speech 1 year later in 1928, the words of which I know you will recognize.
1 century ago today, on July 4th, 1924, President Coolidge addressed the National Education Association, and he delivered a speech entitled, "Education, the Cornerstone of Self-Government." How appropriate on Independence Day that we reflect on that speech, and to provide some selections from it, I'd like to invite the President's great and great-great-grandchildren to come forward.
It cannot be too often pointed out that the fundamental conception of American institutions is in regard for the individual. The rights which are so clearly asserted in the Declaration of Independence are the rights of the individual. The wrongs of which that instrument complains and which it asserts it is the purpose of its signers to redress are the wrongs of the individual. Through it all runs the recognition of the dignity and worth of the individual because of his possession of those qualities which are revealed to us by religion. It is this conception alone which warrants the assertion of the universal right to freedom. America has been the working out of the modern effort to provide a system of government and society which would give to the individual that freedom which his nature requires.
If there was to be self-government, if there was to be popular sovereignty, if there was to be an almost unlimited privilege to vote and hold office, if the people were going to maintain themselves and administer their own political and social affairs, it was necessary as purely practical matter that they should have a sufficiently trained and enlightened intelligence to accomplish that end. Popular government could only be predicated on popular education. In addition to this, the very conception of the value and responsibility of the individual, which made him worthy to be entrusted with his high estate, required that he should be furnished the opportunity to develop the spiritual nature with which he was endowed through adequate education.
It is necessary also that education should be the handmaid of citizenship. Our institutions are constantly and very properly the subject of critical inquiry. Unless their nature is comprehended and their origin is understood, unless their value be properly assessed, the citizen falls prey to those selfish agitators who would exploit his prejudices to promote their own advantage. On this day, of all days, it ought to be made clear that America has had its revolution, and placed the power of government squarely, securely, and entirely in the hands of the people. For all changes which they may desire, for all grievances which they may suffer, the ballot box furnishes a complete method and remedy. Into their hands has been committed complete jurisdiction and control over all the functions of government.
Another element must be secured in the training of citizenship, or else all will be in vain. All of our learning in science, our culture, and our arts will be of little avail unless they are supported by high character, unless there be honor, truth, and justice, unless our material resources are supported by moral and spiritual resources, there is no foundation for progress. A trained intelligence can do much, but there is no substitute for morality, character, and religious convictions. Unless these abide, American citizenship will be found unequal to its task.
Thank you all for reminding us of the wisdom of our 30th president by reciting the words that he spoke literally on this date 100 years ago. Thank you all. This concludes our ceremony, the commemoration of President Coolidge's birthday. I want to thank you all for being a part of it right here. As Laura mentioned, we've got birthday cake back near the Wilder Barn, I think, in the village. So please feel free to go back there and partake and wish the president a happy birthday. So again, thank you all very, very much for being here. Color Guard dismissed.